Okay, hopefully this doesn't shoot across the room because I can feel it springing apart in my fingers. Morning, everybody. So I got a new PQY fuel pressure regulator from Amazon for the LSA supercharger installation on my C5 Corvette. And I'm sure everybody's going, "Oh, Mr. Black, I thought you already had that thing running." Box is a little worse for the wear. Let's see what we got here. Yes, I do already have it running, but we need to try this for some testing. I'm always doing stuff one-handed. That looks shockingly similar to a Aeromotive 13129 regulator. Almost identical, even the bracket. Comes with a gauge. Looks like a 0 to 160. Liquid filled even. Not going to be using that. Looks almost just like this Marshall gauge, except for my Marshall was a 0 to 100. And then it comes with 3-6 orb fittings. I've not heard the greatest in the reviews about the quality of these fittings. So for testing purposes, I'm probably going to keep these as spares. And when I do the swap for troubleshooting, I'm going to use the Aeromotive fittings in the PQY regulator. On the Amazon link, it's kind of unclear what the pressure range is for the PQY version. Maybe it's there somewhere and I just missed it, but if this truly is a copy of the Aeromotive, it should be approximately 40 psi to 75 psi, I believe. This is backed way out too. One thing I noticed just quickly looking at this is it looks like whoever assembled it at the factory has got the body kind of compa-wampused on there. So I think before I put this in the car, I'm going to go ahead and split this body and just make sure, see what everything looks like in there. And maybe we'll take the Aeromotive apart side by side and see what the differences are between the two, if there are any. I've been told, I don't know this for absolute fact, that you can actually put an Aeromotive rebuild kit in the PQY regulator body. So here's my Aeromotive setup. The problem I've been having with this Aeromotive is that every once in a while the fuel pressure will dip down low, like sometimes into the 30s. A lot of times it'll just go into the 40s and it'll get kind of stuck down there. And then every once in a while when I'm watching the fuel pressure gauge, the fuel pressure will spring back up. Like you'll just watch the needle spring up back to where it should be. I don't know what's causing that. On this particular engine combination, if you set the fuel pressure with the hose off like you're supposed to and plugged, so you make your adjustment with this hose disconnected and plugged. When you plug this hose back in, it goes from 58 psi hose off to about 51 psi with the hose back on. So I don't know what's causing that weird fuel pressure loss. It doesn't hurt necessarily the way the car runs, but it does affect the air-fuel ratio when the fuel pressure dips like that. And when you're trying to data log to get the VE table as good as possible, dealing with a wandering fuel pressure is a pain in the ass. So just for troubleshooting purposes, we're going to try the PQY and Let's get this Aeromotive off and we'll put them on the bench side by side and see what we have to work with. We got the Aeromotive out. Here is the two of them side by each. Very, very, very close in semblance between the two of them. So one of the things that I thought might be happening to the Aeromotive is I've heard some stories of this barb fitting for the boost reference threading into the body too far and either fully binding up the spring, which I don't have happening, because if you fully bind that spring, I guess it'll make the fuel pressure go high or even max, and I definitely don't have that problem. But I did take this barb out and I shortened it up 1/8 of an inch to make sure that it wasn't rubbing on the regulator spring. I thought I had this working fixed. It went many miles before it acted up again, but then it came back. Not as bad as the first time, but it came back nonetheless. So, like I said, this is somewhat of an experiment in troubleshooting to see if putting this one in makes any change at all or not. If this one doesn't make any change, I will probably put the Aeromotive back in. So let's go ahead and buzz this guy apart and see what is inside of him. Oh, and another thing that I noticed, the Aeromotive obviously has American hardware in it. And from what I can see so far, the PQY has metric screws in it. I'll be reusing the Aeromotive bracket, so I don't need this bracket. As of now, anyways. Okay, hopefully this doesn't shoot across the room because I can feel it springing apart in my fingers. I guess what I'm most curious to find out about in these regulators is what, if anything, in here can even really stick. So I'm assuming, I'm not 100% sure, that that goes not like that. Like that. And I can see clearly in this one that the barb fitting is not protruding into the body. I don't want to tear this diaphragm at all. There's a bit of crud in here. Glad I took this apart. Probably blow that out with some compressed air. So this ball just rests in that aluminum. I just don't see how anything can get stuck, speaking on behalf of the Aeromotive. But let's take the Aeromotive apart and see what it looks like. Back this regulator spring out because that's got a lot of tension on it. I even tried siliconing the stud underneath the washer to make sure that it wasn't leaking vacuum or boost, which they can do. No fancy power tools on this part of the project. So here's the Aeromotive diaphragm. It does seem to be of just a little bit better quality. Maybe a little bit heavier duty in the rubbery portion of the diaphragm. I do not see any signs of that barb fitting ever having rubbed on this spring. So there is that. My calibrated fingers say that that spring tension is very similar. All of the parts essentially look the same, which makes sense if you're gonna clone something. All right, I'm gonna get these fittings swapped over and we'll put this one together and put it back in the car and then adjust it. Okay, we're getting ready to set the base pressure. I've got this hose off. I adjusted the adjuster screw about halfway. So let's hop in the driver's seat, turn the key, leak check this thing, make sure we don't have fuel squirting all over the place. One thing that's a pain in the ass about C5 Corvettes is there's nowhere to put anything. So even from the factory, they have fuel connections over the driver's side header. And I have even more fuel connections now over the driver's side header, which kind of sucks, but the packaging is very difficult in these cars. So we're just going to get a rough adjustment here by cycling the key. It's a little bit high, but honestly it's close enough to start it. We were at, I'll back it off a little bit. We'll try it one more time. Let's make sure we're not leaking. So everything looks good so far. That's promising. The PQY regulator, it seems as though this stuff is metric, so that's not necessarily a bad thing because the whole entire engine on this thing is metric. So I was always having to chase special tools to adjust the Aeromotive regulator when I needed to. Not special tools, but American tools. Okay, let's try that. All right, we're ready for a test fire. It looks like it's at about 64 right there. That's just on the prime, not where it's going to be when it's running. Or I lied, and that will be where it's at when it's running, which is a little bit different than how the Aeromotive acted between prime and running. Okay, now I want you to see what happens when I plug the hose back into the boost sensing fitting. so far I don't see any functionality problems with the PQY regulator. It seems to be doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing at this time. So I think I'm going to go get some gas because we're running low on fuel. And I will make sure that we get some boost sensing regulation, make sure that that works. And from there, all I can do is put some road miles on it and see if my problem, if it's even really a huge problem, I could be grasping for straws, comes back. If it does come back, then I'll have to start looking elsewhere. But anyways, I hope this shows the difference between $135 to $140 regulator and a $32 regulator on Amazon. They are literally identical with just a few tiny little build quality exceptions. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, the usual, please put them down below, and hopefully this helps somebody make a decision on what kind of regulator they want to buy. I certainly do not frown against buying high quality fuel system parts. I mean, hell, that filter alone right there was $125, I think, but it's a worthy investment to protect $650 fuel injectors. But anyways, hopefully this helps, like I said, and we'll see y'all on the next one.